Hi, and welcome to the Stress webinar. My name is Dr. Steve Tullius, and I'm so happy that you decided to join us for this very important topic. You know, just a few months ago, prior to this COVID-19 pandemic that's affecting the world, I had actually created a stress workshop, a stress class for the public, because the sheer amount of stress that we are experiencing as a nation and as a world, as people, but even before this pandemic hit, was extreme, right? I'm sure you all can relate to what I'm talking about. We've all felt major stress in our world, and now all of us are under this tremendous amount of stress. And so I decided to create this nationwide webinar to really address this important topic of stress, because it's one that's not out there at the forefront of our conversation. So you see, because stress is massively not only affecting our mental and emotional health, but it's actually really affecting our physical health, and it affects our resilience and our resistance, which is a very important topic today when we're faced with this sort of pandemic. And so today's webinar is going to focus on what we can do to be proactive, right? We have all kinds of information. There's great information, defensive measures between social distancing, washing our hands, all these different things that we all know a whole lot about now because we've been inundated in the media, and certainly those are all important and necessary factors. However, what we haven't been talking about is a proactive approach to health, a proactive way to increase our resilience, a proactive way to increase our resistance to the various germs, bacteria, viruses, and things that are out there. And so today's webinar, we're going to talk about the impact stress has on the body. We're going to talk about some specific strategies to decrease that stress so that impact doesn't majorly impact our physical, emotional health. And then we're going to talk about some proactive measures that we can take to actually increase our resilience and our resistance at a time when it's absolutely necessary for ourselves and for our families. So thanks again so much for watching here. Please comment, let me know where you're watching from, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. All right, so let's get started. So just a little bit more about myself. I'm a pediatric and family chiropractor. I've been in practice for 18 years. I'm an international lecturer. I've traveled around the world speaking on chiropractic and neurodevelopmental disorders, epilepsy, various topics. My practice has focused on chronic health challenges and nervous system issues, and I'm the immediate past director of the Autism One Pediatric Chiropractic Continuing Education Program, and past vice president of the International Federation of Chiropractors and Organizations. And the reason that we get the type of results that we do in my clinic, which I just shared some of the types of cases that we help people with, and the reason chiropractic sees these type of changes is because we have this salutogenic approach. This is an approach to health that focuses on improving health and well-being rather than just focusing on factors that cause disease. And so we always have a proactive approach in terms of we believe that the body's designed to be healthy and not sick, and we're looking for interferences that might be causing that, whether it's diet, nervous system issues, whatever it may be. There can be lots of different interferences to the optimal health and function of the body. This workshop, this webinar, is not based upon my opinion. It's based upon the work of many different authors, research journals. When it's my opinion, I'll let you know, but I just want to let you know that this is fully referenced. We're facing this pandemic right now, and as I mentioned, I created this stress workshop even before this pandemic showed its face. However, right now we're under just extreme amounts of stress. And I did some research, looking at this COVID-19 and the stress that it's causing. And this particular study just came out. It's not in reference to the stress of COVID-19, but it is pointing out how stress actually can affect our future offspring. They found in this study, which is just released, that the sperm is affected by chronic stress and long-term stress. And so stress, especially the type of stress we're having now, has some serious implications. I'm sure many of you have seen this is the Johns Hopkins University Coronavirus Research Center map, and this was just taken from yesterday, showing the total confirmed cases. I have this here. Many times we're being bombarded by the media. In fact, I just saw a statistic. There has been over 2.1 billion instances of coronavirus, COVID-19 in the media, on the internet right now, compared to any other, swine flu, bird flu, SARS, it's in pales in comparison to what we've seen in the media. And so what the media often is not sharing right now is the total number of people recovered. That number jumped. It was under 100,000 just the other day. It jumped up, as you can see, to 113,000. So keep in mind that many people are recovering, and while we need to be diligent in our efforts to curb this and practice all this safety of social distancing and hand washing and all those different factors, we need to really, I believe, start to focus on how do we increase resilience? How do we increase the health and vitality of the body? The body's designed to be healthy. I know in doing workshops and lectures, I've given over 200 in the last 7 years here. I ask this question all the time. I ask the audience, how many of you believe that the body's designed to be healthy and not sick? And everyone raises their hand. See, we all believe that the body's designed to be healthy. The thing is, we often aren't focusing on the factors that increase resilience, the factors that increase health. We tend to be focusing on what causes disease instead of how do we become resilient and resistant to this. So what I want to focus on today is how do we develop a game plan to increase vitality and resistance. I'm 42 years old, and the last 20 years or so, I've only been sick maybe 3 or 4 times. And when I say sick, I mean like a cold or flu, nothing significant that's really affected me. I haven't missed a day of work in I think 20 years here now. So I want to help develop a game plan for you, and I believe you already have much of what it takes. Now, I just want to share some of these statistics here, because the thing is, we need to realize, yes, we're in this pandemic right now, but we're also in a pandemic of chronic illness, in our country and throughout the world. In the United States alone, there's over 107 million Americans have at least one of 6 chronic health conditions. And when we look at the situation with COVID, we see that the people who are succumbing to this, the ones that are dying from this are the ones who have other disease processes already, right? And so our country, over half of the country has a chronic health condition, and it's costing our country $3.3 trillion per year. Now, it's not just the adults in our country, our children are being massively affected as well. This was a study from the journal Academic Pediatrics in 2011, and it found that 43% or 32 million children in the United States have at least one of 20 chronic health conditions, right? And that number goes up to 54% when we include neurodevelopmental disorders and obesity. And so, see, we have a crisis right now, absolutely. And guess what? We've had a crisis all along. If we can start to focus on health and well-being, we're going to position ourselves, our families, and our country and world in a place where we don't have to be as afraid of many of the things out there, because we've developed such strong resistance. Now, here's the thing, this statistic here, this is from the American Psychology Association. They did this study in 2017, and it says here 75% of Americans report experiencing at least one symptom of stress in the past month. I'm sure that number has gone up in recent, with the recent developments, with the quarantine and everybody being so afraid of this novel virus here. And so here's some of the symptoms of stress. Many of you are probably experiencing this now: lying awake at night, being more irritable, angry. In fact, I saw some horrible statistics recently that there's a rise in domestic violence, in many different areas right now, and they're assuming it's due to the economic situations, the people, kids being at home, and everyone at home with all this stress. 35% of people experiencing nervousness, anxiousness, lack of motivation, fatigue, overwhelmed, depressed, and sad. So here's the thing: who hasn't felt these things, right, in this current situation? I would be surprised if there's anyone who hasn't felt some of that or experienced some of that. I know I certainly have. And so I want to encourage you, number one, it's okay to feel those things. It's okay, and it's common, and it's going to be okay. Keep reminding yourself, keep guarding your thoughts. When you feel the fear sink in, take a deep breath. Go back to the things that really help you come out of fear and stress. This was a podcast I just recently listened to, It just came out on immunity protocols with COVID-19. This is from Dr. Dan Stickler. He's a medical doctor, medical director of the Neurohacker Collective, and what he had to say, I found very interesting. He said this is a perfect storm he's talking about all this stress. This is the perfect storm to upregulate the stress system of the body, which we're going to talk a whole lot about in a second. And when the stress system gets upregulated, the immune system is compromised. See, when we are stressed, our immune system gets compromised, and so yes, we need to focus on defensive factors, but now we need to focus on how do we deal with this stress and how do we mitigate it and how do we get healthier. So this is why it's so important right now to pay attention to those simple lifestyle factors that can create a more thriving state and really upregulate the immune system. So that's what he continued to talk about. This Dr. Robert Sapolsky said in his book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, he says stress-related disease emerges predominantly out of the fact that we so often activate a physiological system that has evolved for responding to acute physical emergencies, but we turn it on for months on end, worrying about mortgages, relationships, and promotions. See, we have all been under chronic stress. Yes, we're under acute stress as well, but we've all been under chronic stress. And when that happens, our body wasn't designed for that. It was designed to have this fight or flight response for acute situations, not to be ongoing. And so what we know now in the literature, and I'm going to share a little bit in just a second here, is that stress affects the whole body. It affects the brain, it affects the respiratory system, the reproductive system, immune system, heart, gastrointestinal systems. The effects of stress, we feel it all over, from headaches to overeating, undereating, restlessness, chest pain, fatigue. I mentioned some of these already: social withdrawal, depression, stomach upset. If you're feeling these things, make sure you stick around, and so because I'm going to have a lot of tips and strategies to help overcome many of these situations. Stress, we know, alters what's called the gut-brain axis. You've probably been hearing a whole lot more about this in the media. Fortunately, this is being talked about more and more, the gut-brain connection. We now know and have known for quite a while that there's an intimate connection between our gut, our stomach, our digestive system, and our brain, and our overall body health. Right? And so this is why the gut is so important. We need to take care of our gut. That's a whole separate topic, but we know that stress is actually negatively impacting the gut, and that then negatively affects the brain and vice versa. Here's some quick facts about the gut. It contains 100 trillion bacteria of 500 to 1,000 different species. Now, this is very little known. When I ask people this question, and share this information, they're very surprised. 90% of your body's serotonin is actually made in your gut, right? It's not made in the brain, and as we know, the serotonin is the happy hormone. It helps us feel good, and 90% of it's made in your gut, and not by you. It's actually made by the bacteria inside your gut. This is why it's so important to have a healthy gut with a healthy amount of the right bacteria in our guts. 70% of your immune cells are actually in your digestive system. So we know that stress affects also the cardiovascular system. This was a study in 2001 which showed that stress causes autonomic nervous system activation and indirectly affects the function of your heart. It can cause your heart rate and then your blood pressure to go up. It can cause an increase in blood lipids, disorders in blood clotting, vascular changes, and it can also cause arrhythmias and also heart attacks. Stress is affecting our brains. This study actually looked at research over the last 50 years. And here's what they're finding is that chronic stress can actually affect your brain mass and size. It's now known that this stress can not only cause structural changes in your brain, but also causes long-term effects on your nervous system. So as we mentioned, stress absolutely affects the immune system. There's now conclusive evidence that chronic stress will dysregulate that immune system, making one more susceptible to infection, and it can exacerbate viral and bacterial infections as well as negatively impacting wound healing. And they've also seen increased death rates and disease rates associated with chronic stress. Now here's the thing, not all stress is bad. There is something called eustress. Now eustress is actually positive. It will energize. It's generally short term. It can actually improve your performance, and it's believed to be within your coping mechanism. So it's something that we can handle, right? An example would be working out. That's positive. It's going to stress your body. It's going to stress your muscles, but it actually is going to help your body grow, right, and get bigger muscles. Now, if you worked out too much every day, the same muscle group, then you would actually break that muscle down and cause some serious challenges for yourself. Now, distress is going to feel unpleasant. It's going to deplete our energy. It's going to decrease our performance, and it's believed to be something that we cannot handle. And this will lead to physical illness, mental fatigue, and emotional depletion. Now, the type of stress we're all experiencing now certainly does not fit into the eustress. It's in the distress category. And here's just a bar graph or a bell curve of this eustress and bad stress analogy. We need some stress. If you don't challenge a child, if you don't have boundaries for them and give them higher levels of schoolwork while they're in school, then they're not going to grow. If a tree is not stressed and doesn't have times of drought, it's actually not going to drive its roots deep into the soil, and it's going to, when the storm comes, it's going to break, right? And so we do need some stress in our lives. However, when it gets to that point of too much stress, right, kind of like our daily lifestyles, beyond this pandemic, what we've all been living before this pandemic hit, we're already in exhaustion, and now we add this extra stress, and many people are going into anxiety, panic, anger. As my good friend Dr. Amy Spolster talks about, people are living in their brain stems, and what she means by that is that that's the part of the brain, that's the reptilian brain, the stress response brain, and many of us are there right now. That's why you see so many angry arguments on social media. That's why you see couples and families fighting more right now. And so we have to talk about how do we get out of that state. And one of the first things we need to do is all just take a deep breath. All right. I hope you did that with me. That feels good, doesn't it? It starts to get us out of that stress response and into that resting, healing, digesting state, which we're going to talk about momentarily. Now, Dr. Hans Selye, he's known as the father of stress, and talking about stress in this last part of the 20th century. What he said is that it's not stress that kills us; it is our reaction to it, right? So it's how we think about stress, it's how we respond to stress, and how our body can cope with stress. So this is known as the window of resilience. It was adapted from Dr. Dan Siegel, and as you can see here, when our stress response is activated as it goes up on that curve there, as long as we stay within that zone, those two lines, we'll be okay, because we get stressed out, but then we start to get calmed down. The stressor goes away, and then we start to settle down. Our heart rate goes down. We begin to feel calm. We think clearly and relax. However, if we don't have that deactivation period, the settling down period, and stay in chronic stress, here's what happens, right? If we have a traumatic event or chronic stressful event, we get stuck in a high state of hyperarousal. We get stuck in this state where we're in hyperactivity of our fight or flight response. We're worrying, we have anxiety. It can lead to things like panic, rage, even pain. And here's the thing, if we stay there long enough, what can happen, we can get depleted, and our body energy gets depleted, and we fall into a state of low hypoarousal, and in that state we're feeling things like depression, isolation, exhaustion, fatigue, numbness. These are the type of things we're feeling. Now, this is all controlled and mediated by something known as your autonomic nervous system. This is one of the most neglected parts of our body, one of the most neglected systems in all of healthcare. Okay, how many of you have had your nervous system or your autonomic nervous system checked in the last year at your last physical? We have our blood pressure checked, we have our cholesterol checked, we have our urine checked, we have our heart rate checked, we have all these things checked, and yes, they should be, but what about our autonomic nervous system? Now, this is what this system does for us. We're all very familiar with one part of it, known as the sympathetic system, also known as your fight, flight, or freeze response, right? This is for survival. We all know what happens when we get into that state. You hear a loud noise in the middle of the night, and you wake out of sleep, and your heart is pounding. Your palms might be sweaty, and you're breathing rapidly, right? Your body's getting into this fight or flight response, getting ready to mobilize to either run or fight. Now that is a very healthy response. We need that response. If there's a truck coming at you, we need that to kick into gear so we can jump out of the way, right? Adrenaline kicks in. Now here's the thing. If we stay stuck in fight or flight, which many of us already were before this pandemic even hit, many of us have been living in chronic fight or flight. Many of our children have been living in chronic fight or flight. If we don't get into the other side of that autonomic system, the parasympathetic system, which is known as the resting, digesting, repair, and development side, this is where our bodies grow and develop and heal. If we don't get into that side, then our body starts to break down. Right? Because we cannot maintain staying in a state of chronic fight or flight. So here's some signs that you might have an autonomic imbalance. Right? On the right there, you see high sympathetic, high fight or flight. It's going to be hard to sleep. Right? You're going to have insomnia, and it should make sense. If your body thinks that you are that there is a danger, if you are in a fight or flight response physiologically, then your body will not want to fall asleep. Right? Things like diarrhea, IBS, irritability, anxiety, excessive sweating, manic episodes, focus issues, ADHD, neurodevelopmental disorders, these are often all associated with a high sympathetic, high fight or flight response, as shown in the literature. And on the other side, we can get into that low parasympathetic side. We're going to see things like constipation, depression, hormonal issues, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, thyroid problems, adrenal fatigue, being immune compromised, brain fog, mood issues, memory loss, autoimmune disease, right? Here's the thing. What they've found in the research, and I go into this more deeply into some of my lectures, is that nearly every disease that we can name and label is associated with autonomic nervous system imbalances, right? Yet we are not checking this, right? Does it make sense if you're in fight or flight that the body is not healing, it's not repairing, it's not doing what it's designed to do, it's actually breaking down. And so there's actually a way to measure this. It's called heart rate variability, and heart rate variability is the gold standard in healthcare for measuring this autonomic nervous system response and measuring your body's ability to adapt to stress, your body's ability to cope with stress, your body's ability to handle stress. Right? So don't you think it would be a good decision for us all to have this checked and monitored? There's something like 33,000 peer-reviewed referenced journal articles on heart rate variability. It's been known about for a very long time. However, very few healthcare providers are actually measuring heart rate variability. This is something that I do in my office on every initial consult and every progress exam, and this is what many of my colleagues do as well. And so it should be part of our standard of care throughout healthcare. So here's some ways having a low heart rate variability impacts our health. And just to take a step back, heart rate variability, what it is it's measuring the intervals between heartbeats. It's measuring the time between your heartbeats. Your heartbeat should not be the same. The time intervals between your heartbeats from one beat to the next should not be the same amount of time. It should actually be variable, and it should make sense. Your heart is constantly responding to your body's demands, and the only way your heart knows how to do that is through the brain and your nervous system. Your brain and nervous system tell your heart what the body needs, how to respond to the environment. And so your heart variability should be very high. It should be constantly changing, even in the resting state. And so if you have a low heart rate variability, it means that your heart does not have a variable heartbeat. It means that it's very much more like a metronome. It's just going do, 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 do. You have a low adaptability to your environment. You have a low ability to cope with stress and handle stress well. Here's what the research shows. People with low heart rate variability show high signs of depression. There's many studies looking at how people with depression have low heart rate variability. Also, people with various autoimmune diseases, individuals with neurodevelopmental disorders, schizophrenia, arthritis, I mentioned fibromyalgia, Alzheimer's disease. Many of these different situations are associated with low heart rate variability. When you have a high heart rate variability, it means you have a healthy nervous system. You're going to have a greater sense of well-being. You're going to have more energy, better physical health, better sleep, better cognitive function, and even a lower risk of high blood pressure. So when it comes to managing stress and coping with it, here's some things I found out there. This was from the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Okay, here's some tips on how to handle stress. They say a person's well-being relies on balance of the body, mind, and spirit. Right? How we cope with stress depends on a variety of individual factors, including our biological makeup, right? Our perception of our own ability to cope with the challenge, that's important. Our ability to use stress management skills, and the characteristics of the stressor, right? How big it is, the timing of it, and the duration, right? We have in this pandemic, we have a very big stressor, and it's been going on for a while. We don't know when it's going to end. There's lots of lack of certainty there. So those are some of the ways that some of the mechanisms, some of the things that we have available to us to cope with stress. Now, when it comes specifically to this COVID-19 situation, I just found this on the web. This is from the Columbia University Irving Medical Center. Dr. Anthony Pulifico is doctor at that clinic there. He had this to say in this interview. He said, we need to ask ourselves, what's a helpful level of concern and action? Right? Because what he was saying is that right now we are worrying excessively. We're watching too much of the media, and that's not helpful. Okay, it's actually becoming, it's causing people to become majorly stressed and actually fearful, and leading to not only anxiety, but then that increasing that stress response, that fight or flight response, and it causes paralysis. We start to no longer be able to move, to act, to do things proactively. And so he said we need to focus on things that we can control. Instead of focusing on what if questions, he said, develop a specific plan for you and your family to stay safe, meet your responsibilities, and stay socially connected. Having and following a clear plan can help us feel more in control and less anxious, right? So it's a good idea to develop a plan. Number one, do you have what you need, right? And if you don't have what you need, I know a lot of families and individuals are going through some very tough times right now. Make sure you look up and search for the local resources and national and state resources. There are various services that have been set up. There's small business administration loans that have been set up at almost 0% interest. There's various services that are available to meet those type of needs. So develop a plan. But if you're in fear and anxiety, it's going to stop you from actually reaching out and doing those things. Now, I thought this was incredibly important. I'm a pediatric family chiropractor, so I see lots of kids and families. And so it's important to help our kids cope with this, right? Our kids are growing up in a time when they're already majorly stressed by social media and bullying and all sorts of things. And now they have this to deal with. This was from the National Association of School Psychologists. And what they said, here's some tips. They said, remain calm and reassuring, right? And talk to them about it. Don't not talk to them about it. And really ask them what they may already know about it, because a lot of times they have incorrect information. They've heard from a friend that if they get it, they're going to die and all these certain things. Let them know that the percentage of children that are actually dying and having serious complications from this is extremely rare, right? And so really calm their fears. And then ask yourself, what are we modeling for our kids? If we're super afraid, if we're super scared, if we're always talking about how bad it is right in front of them and have the TV on and the social media and everything, it's consuming us, guess what? They are little sponges, right? You already know this. And they feel everything. Even if you're not saying it, they feel your feelings. So make sure that I'm going to have some more tips here in a second. Make sure that you are proactively working to calm your own fears and try to maintain as normal routine as possible, bedtime, maintaining school activity, homeschool activities, things like that, social relationships as much as you can given the situation. So here's top 8 immune boosting foods and activities that you can start right away. Things, number 1, eating well, right? We all know that's one of the most important things, and I found it kind of interesting. In the stores, the meat is gone, and a lot of the obviously the toilet paper and things like that. What I found interesting was that I saw so many people in the fruit and vegetable areas when normally it's not that busy, right? So I actually thought to myself, this situation is actually forcing some people to actually eat better, hopefully. Now, as a rule of thumb, try to eat organically as often as possible. Our food is sprayed with pesticides. It has all sorts of chemicals in it. Our meats have antibiotics and hormones due to the fact that the cattle and other animals are injected with those things. And so remember, you're not what you eat, you are what you ate. Right? So try to eat organically as much as possible. This is a great time to make soups and broths. Do what your grandmothers or great grandmothers used to do. Make your own broths. Use, this is a time where we really need to conserve and use everything we have. So use the stalks of the broccoli. You can chop those up and do lots of different things with that. Make these soups. Number 2, get plenty of sleep, right? And it's hard to do when we're so stressed out, right? So follow the tips that I'm going to be sharing here to make sure you get your nervous system more balanced and regulated so you can get more sleep. Number 3, exercise. I see people saying, on social media, don't go outside. What are you doing? People are outside. They're not supposed to do that. Hey, listen, right? You got to get outside for many reasons. Number 4, too, is vitamin D, right? But number 3, exercise. Move your body and get your kids' bodies moving, whether it's jumping on a trampoline, going for walks, runs, bicycle rides, whatever it is. You can go outside. You don't just have the social distancing aspect involved. Number 4, vitamin C is crucial for our immune system. Vitamin D as well. Where do we get vitamin D? We get it from the sun. And so guess what? They've found, there's extensive research that has shown that flus, and colds and things like that are more rampant in this time of year because there's less sunlight, right? And now people are staying indoors, they're getting even less sunlight. Make sure you go outside and get your vitamin D. Zinc as well is a great supplement that you can take to help with your immune system function. Number 5, elderberry, medicinal mushrooms, garlic. These are all things that have great immune system supporting benefits. Number 6 and 7 and 8. Now, these are the things you need to avoid. Avoid sugar. Sugar, is a great way to put fuel on a fire, right? If you're all the bacteria, viruses, things like that, it's going to help create a ripe environment for those things to thrive in. Avoid empty calories and processed foods. So avoid the carbs. Avoid going to the pantry. Try to eat as much as possible the raw fruits and vegetables and things like that. And of course, avoid alcohol, nicotine, and other substances that are going to negatively affect your immune system. So here's my top 10 stress management habits now. So these are ways you can increase your heart rate variability. These are ways you can increase your resilience of your body and your adaptability of your nervous system so your body can be at its best. Number 1, I already mentioned it, and some of these are duplicative because they're that important, right? Spend time outside, right? Spend time in nature. Just even go lay outside on the grass, right? These type of things are extremely calming for your system. They're very grounding. Get outside, right? And schedule social activities. Now, you're probably saying, well, what about social distancing? Well, you can do it through various ways. You can do it through FaceTime. You can do it. We have so much technology. The other day, I just decided to go on my Facebook page and do a live just to say hello and to reconnect, and it was great. I connected with people I hadn't connected since school, high school, and other places. And so schedule social activities other ways. Schedule them for your kids. There's lots of ways it can be done. Make sure, again, eating well, getting plenty of sleep, scheduling daily relaxing time. I know many of you are home now and you're probably saying, well, I am relaxing. Well, chances are you probably aren't. When I say relaxing time, it doesn't mean scrolling through your social media feed. It doesn't mean watching CNN. It means relaxing. It means just not doing anything, right? Just hanging out and relaxing. Number 6, do things you enjoy. This is a great time to take up a hobby, right? If you wanted to learn to play the guitar, if you wanted to learn a new language, do whatever things you enjoy. You can still do them. Have dance parties at home. There's lots of video games and things like that, like Just Dance and other things that we have access to. Get creative and do things that you enjoy. Make sure you're sharing your feelings with your spouse, with your parents, with your siblings. Make sure you're talking with your friends and share your feelings. We're all going through this. No one is alone in the stress that we're all experiencing right now. Number 8, deep breathing, right? I know I talk super fast. That's because there's lots of information I want to cover here. make sure you're taking deep breaths. Do deep breathing. In fact, there's something I want you to write down. It's called heart math. Now, this is something that you can do to really increase your heart rate variability and actually monitor your heart rate variability. Heart math is a device you can connect to your phone, and it clips to your ear. There's a little add-on, and I think it's about $120 or so. I have one in my home. And you clip it to your ear. It's measuring your heart rate variability, and it helps you to, through the application, to get into a state of coherence, to get into a state of relaxation. Okay, and there's so doing that daily. There's also meditation apps out there doing different things like that. And again, number 9, exercising, and number 10. I'll have to admit I'm extremely partial to, but there's great reasons for. I'm going to share it with you in a second. Is chiropractic. Now, many of you may be thinking, if you had a positive impression about chiropractic, you probably thought it was for neck pain and back pain, and sure, it certainly helps those things. However, as I shared with you just a moment ago, we see individuals with situations such as epilepsy, ADHD, chronic gut issues. We see individuals with all sorts of health challenges in our practice, as do many chiropractors around the nation. And so I'd like for you to consider this. Remember that diagram I showed you earlier where they're talking about how we handle stress? They talked about our biological makeup, how we perceive stress, our stress management skills, and the character of the stress, or how intense it is. Now, what I think they didn't make this diagram quite correct. You see, our biological makeup is really, I believe, a much bigger factor in how we're able to handle stress. You see, if we have a disconnect with our brain, if that brain and nervous system is not able to process stress, if we're in a stress response, how do you think that's going to affect the rest of the body? How do you think it's going to affect our ability to even manage stress and cope with stress mentally and emotionally? See, we have so much focus on mental and emotional health in our country, on the mental component of it, of the emotional component of it. However, if we are in fight or flight physiology, that's a physical health issue that's affecting our ability to be in a healthy mental emotional state. Now, in chiropractic, we address something known as a vertebral subluxation, which is a misalignment of the spinal column, which happens most commonly in the upper neck and is going to have negative consequences on your nervous system. It's going to negatively affect your nervous system. And here's what we found. The research is showing this. We know that without a doubt that adjusting the spine actually changes the brain function. This was a study in 2016 in the Journal of Neuroplasticity that found that the prefrontal cortex is affected, and there's changes in brain activity by 20% when an individual has an adjustment of the neck, right? So we know that structure always affects function, right? If we were to take a beam out of your house, load-bearing beam, or take it out of a bridge, that would affect the integrity of your house. A wall might fall down, right? And so when the spine is misaligned, when there's these subluxations of the spine, it's going to negatively affect your nervous system and health. It's going to affect your autonomic nervous system, that fight or flight response. It can affect the blood flow to the brain. It can affect the cerebrospinal fluid to your brain. It can cause an increased inflammatory response through that stress response and create tension in the spinal cord itself. So here's some of the research showing us this. So what we found in this particular study in 2006 is that they looked at heart rate variability. Remember that gold standard for measuring your autonomic nervous system function? They found that there was a decrease in heart rate and an increase in heart rate variability for these people in this study, meaning that they had a healthy autonomic nervous system balance after the correction of that vertebral subluxation. Now, here are 3 different studies all showing the same thing. Now, these 3 studies were in 3 different journals. One was in the Journal of Chiropractic Medicine, this other was in the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association, and the third journal was in the journal Spine, right? These are 3 different professions, actually, chiropractic, osteopathy, and medicine, all finding the same thing, that adjustments of the neck have a parasympathetic effect. They have a calming, resting, healing, digesting effect on the body, and that's because your vagus nerve, which controls the autonomic nervous system, travels through your neck. So if there's stress in that area, if there's stress in your upper neck, it's going to negatively affect your stress response and can put people into a stress response. And we're seeing that when we adjust those areas, that it has a resting, calming, and healing effect on the body. Now, This is my friend Carson here. Now, if you're looking at these pictures, you're probably moved by just the sadness of him, but take a look at his eyes. Take a look at the disconnect, the asymmetry of the eyes. Now, Carson was diagnosed with autism. He was also diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. He had a lot of challenges when he came to my practice. Now, take a look at this next picture. Now this is Carson, I believe 8 weeks later, maybe somewhere around 6 weeks. Do you notice a difference with the eye asymmetry? Now, just a smile on his face. Now that previous picture, when you saw him crying like this, he was tantruming constantly. He was constantly dysregulated. It was difficult to take him anywhere. He was constantly running. He couldn't stop. He couldn't calm down because his body was in fight or flight, right? We were able to measure that. We were able to see that. And by adjusting his spine, by adjusting his nervous system, we were able to see fantastic changes in this child. And now his sensory processing challenges, his behavioral challenges are just phenomenally better. So one of the ways that many chiropractors measure this, and we do this in our office and many do throughout the nation and world, is something called paraspinal thermography. You see, the skin temperature is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, and we can indirectly measure the autonomic nervous system function by measuring the skin temperature along the spine. Your skin temperature should be within the same temperature range, within about 0.5 degrees. And when there's asymmetries, when there's imbalances in the skin temperature, that tells us that that part of the spine, that area of the nervous system, is not able to regulate the skin temperature and not able to regulate something as simple as that. Now, this is some fantastic work. This was published in 2015. Dr. Scott Rosa, along with some other doctors, are finding, they're doing functional MRIs. They're looking at cerebral spinal fluid flow and blood flow to the brain, right? And what they're finding is that when there's a misalignment of the neck, it can cause a neural compromise. It can put pressure on the spinal cord and can affect the cerebral spinal fluid flow as well as the blood flow and venous flow to and from the brain. See, these are some huge impacts that subluxation can have on the body, and it's no wonder that we see the type of results that we do, like with Liam here. Liam came to my office having 60 seizures a day, and within 4 weeks he was seizure-free. Now, he had intractable epilepsy, meaning that medications were not changing his seizures, and this family did nothing else besides add chiropractic to their lives. We started adjusting his spine 3 times a week for the first 4 weeks, and his seizures started to go down incrementally, and then at 4 weeks he was seizure-free. He's now 6 years seizure-free. His MRIs and EEGs have been normal since that period, when his parents were told that he would always have seizures, and that those EEGs and MRIs would never be normal. I presented his case along with over 20 cases recently at the Epilepsy Awareness Day conference in Anaheim last year, with many similar cases. And so really the reason I believe that we're seeing these type of changes, one, the blood flow, cerebral spinal fluid flow issues, but also in this study in 2011, they found that the areas of the brain before and after a specific task. So they had individuals perform a specific task, and they measured the brain activity before and then after an adjustment of the neck. And they found that an individual used less glucose, right? They used less energy to perform the same task after the adjustment of the brain. So the brain is working more efficiently in that instance. Now, there's some research out there that also shows that there's some immune system changes that occur when people are getting adjusted, when they're under chiropractic care. This was a study in 1994 looking at individuals who are HIV positive. Now, it was a small study. However, what they did find is that the control group actually experienced an 8% decrease in their CD4 cell counts, right, which are highly involved with our immune system function, right? Now, the group that was receiving chiropractic care had a 48% increase in their cell count, right? And this was over a 6-month period. 48% increase in the group that's receiving chiropractic, while the group that was not receiving chiropractic had an 8% decrease, which you would expect in an HIV positive individual, right? This is some really powerful information here. Now, this was a study, this was in the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association. Now, osteopathy and chiropractic adjustments are not the same. They're similar in many ways. The mechanism and how these approaches bring about results is very similar. And what they found is that, this was a study looking at elderly patients hospitalized with pneumonia, right? This is a very important topic. Considering that those with COVID that are deceasing, that are passing away, are typically in the elderly category, right? And so there's 28 people in the group that received the osteopathic manipulation, and then 30 in the group that did not. Now, in the hospital setting, both groups were receiving antibiotics, both groups were receiving traditional care. However, what they found is that this study is the first to show that these manipulations of the spine actually reduced both the duration of antibiotics and the length of hospital stay for elderly individuals hospitalized with pneumonia. Right? This is really powerful information. This was in 2000. Now, this was in 2010. This is 406 subjects aged, they basically kind of reproduced this study, but a bigger group, 406 subjects, 50 years or older, hospitalized with pneumonia. And they found, here's what they found. They saw reductions in the length of stay. They saw reductions in the antibiotic use, and they saw there was also a decreased incidence in respiratory failure and death in the group that was receiving these osteopathic manipulations. So the authors said, now note this, they said the results suggest a potential role for this manipulative therapy to augment conventional antibiotic therapy in the treatment of pneumonia. This role may become more important with increasing antibiotic resistance, emerging pathogens, the aging global population, the cost of healthcare, and the likelihood of another influenza pandemic, right? Just something to ponder there. Another study, this was looking at immune system changes again. This is now a systematic review. They looked at all the literature. This was in 2017, so more recent. There was 8 trials that were included, 325 participants in those studies, and what they found was that they found that spinal adjustments can increase substance P, neurotensin, oxytocin, and interleukin levels, and may influence cortisol after an adjustment, or after this manipulation of the spine. Now, why is that important? Because these substances are highly involved with the immune system function as well. So what causes subluxations? Really, when I ask this question in public forums, people typically tell me stress, right? Usually we're thinking physical stress. So people are thinking car accidents, injuries, things like that, but it's mental, emotional stress. It's chemical stress in our environment, what we eat, what we're exposed to. Mental stress, all of us are chronically under that, and so it's caused by stress. When the body's under too much stress, we're going to see the spine, the structure misalign, and that's going to necessarily impact the nervous system, the spinal cord, which travels through your spinal column, right? So how common do you think subluxation is? When I ask this in public lectures as well, the answer that comes back to me is very common, and I absolutely 100% agree. Now we don't have a ton of studies on this topic, but this was in a medical journal in 1987. They found that 1,000 infants were checked in the first month of life. 80% were found of a misalignment of the upper neck, right? It happens in infants too. A lot of times people wonder why children are being checked by chiropractors, why infants should be checked. Well, this is absolutely why. How much stress do you think is on a child's spine and skull when they're being born, either via C-section delivery or just normal vaginal birth? They found that up to 60 pounds of traction is on that spine as the child's being pulled out, in an area that is not developed, right? When we hold a child, when we hold an infant, we cradle that head, we protect that spine and neck because it's so delicate, right? And so this was another study that found, with 1,250 infants, they found that in the first 5 days of life, 90% had suffered some form of birth trauma or strain to the neck and cranium, the skull, and 10% was more severe. Now, I often say that 10%, those are often, some of them are the lucky ones. And the reason I say that is because those are the ones who get noticed. Those are the ones who have what's known as torticollis, where the neck is stuck off to the side. Those are the ones with plagiocephaly, where the skull is misshapen. Now, unfortunately, many times the standard of care is trying to stretch that neck over. The challenge with that, the problem with that, is that infants don't have tight muscles. It's not like they're out doing CrossFit or something, right? They don't have tight muscles. What they have are tight nerves. They have nerves that are in a state of tension, which are causing those muscles to contract, to be stuck off in that position. And guess what happens when we apply a gentle, and I repeat, a very gentle, light tapping, very light oscillation, vibration, adjustment of the upper neck? They go into a state of ease. They go out of states of tension. We see kids with things like colic and other challenges, failure to thrive, children that are not that have projectile vomiting. We see all sorts of things improve for these children, because guess what? These children are in a state of fight or flight stress response, and it's being unrecognized. Now, back in 1969, Dr. Abraham Tobin did recognize this, and he said that the birth process, even under the optimal control conditions, is potentially traumatic, crippling event for the fetus. Spinal cord and brainstem injuries occur often during the process of birth, but frequently escape diagnosis. So why do they escape diagnosis? Well, obviously, nobody's checking. Nobody's checking infants. In an ideal world, every single child would have, an individual would have their spine and nervous system checked throughout a lifetime to make sure that that spine, which houses and protects your delicate nervous system, is always healthy, in a state of ease, right? And so right now we all find ourselves in a great degree of distress. We all find ourselves experience a great degree of uncertainty. And we actually were experiencing it even before this pandemic, right? We all were there. I know I was there. I know many of you were there, right? And so here's the thing. The last thing I'm suggesting is that chiropractic is the answer to all of this. I'm certainly not suggesting that, and I don't want to see anyone out there quoting me as saying that chiropractic is the thing that's going to stop the COVID pandemic. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we need to have some proactive approaches to increase our health and resistance, and not simply focus on how do we fight disease. We need to improve our health and vitality, and we are neglecting our nervous system health and function. And chiropractic is a strategy and healthcare service that has a major impact on our vitality, on our autonomic nervous system, and our overall quality of life. Right? And here's what they found in a review of the literature, actually, of what chiropractic does for people who don't have any health problem, who have no disease process. They found people who are under what's known as wellness care, people like myself who have been receiving chiropractic care for the last 27 years as part of a healthy lifestyle. They found that even though these people had no pain and no problems, that these people had improvements in their autonomic nervous system. They had improvement in their endocrine system, their hormones, their heart function, immune system, muscle strength, athletic ability, range of motion, neurocognitive functions, visual acuity, reproductive hormones, all sorts of things improve. And so I always ask the question in public lectures, I say, why do you think all these things improve for people without any pains or problems? Right? And what people typically tell me is that it's because chiropractic is focused on helping improve health and function of your nervous system. Your nervous system is there. It's your master system that controls and coordinates all functions of the body. And when you remove stress from that system, guess what? Your body does better. Your body is striving for health. It's designed to be healthy. You have to have a healthy nervous system. And so, guys, I hope this has been helpful. I hope this information is going to be impactful, the tips and strategies. Go back and rewatch this, share it with others. Go back to the immune system boosting tips. Go back to the strategies on how to talk to your children. Go back to all the foods and the activities and the stress management tips. And please seek out and look more into chiropractic, right? I'm no longer in private practice. I stepped away from private practice. I do go back to San Diego once a month to see patients. However, I'm not going to be able to do it, unfortunately, due to this current restrictions on travel. However, I stepped out of private practice so I could help get this message out more to the public, because this is truly a public health issue. Many people do not realize that subluxation is negatively impacting their health and function and quality of life. And so what I've put together is something called thisischiropractic.org. It's a nonprofit organization in the making, which is going to help get this message out to the public. On that page, at that location, you can find a doctor in your area, chiropractors in your area that are specifically trained to locate and analyze vertebral subluxations. Because like many healthcare specialties, disciplines, there's various specialties within our profession. Some chiropractors are focused on sports issues. Some are focused on workers' comp injuries, back pain, things like that. What you need to find and want to find is a chiropractor specifically focused on the nervous system, specifically focused on correcting subluxations in the spine, because not all are focused and trained in doing that because of the differences in approaches and the specialties within the profession. So This is Chiropractic is where you'll find that. Thanks so much for watching. Please, if this has been valuable, share it with others. And please, if you have any questions, you can find me at Dr. Steve, find me on Facebook, my fan page, Dr. Steve Tullius. Let me know if you have any questions. If you can't find a doctor in your area, that is a relatively new directory. If you can't find someone in your area, let me know, and we will help find someone who is great for you in your area. Thanks again. Stay healthy and well, and may God bless you, our country, and this whole planet. Take care.